mentioned that you were an atheist, that you joined the Navy when you were 17. COVID almost killed you. You moved out to the boonies.
Yes.
These are all fascinating things. What do you want to start with?
Oh, there's another bomb I'll drop in a minute. Let's start with COVID almost killing me, and then maybe we'll flash back to kind of some of the like how I learned how God talks to me.
Okay.
And then every once in a while when he talks to me different
Yeah.
than I'm used to, right?
Yeah.
And I think that happens with a lot of people. He doesn't just pick one way to talk. But,
totally agree. Yep.
So my first of 3 bouts with COVID was in 2021, and that was like the typical like fever, nasty, no taste, no smell, all of that, and it was pretty rough, but it was a couple of weeks, and then I recovered.
Okay.
That was in 2021. In 2022, I got sick late spring, and it just wouldn't go away. And it just kind of progressed all the way from like mid-April all the way into the first week of June. And I just kept getting sicker, and I was on like FMLA at work and like working like 15 hours a week. They'd be like, just work when you can, and then just write the rest of your hours down. And it's like COVID. They had like special COVID, back when it was still pretty serious.
And you knew this was COVID early on on the second time, or no?
I did know.
Okay, you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did know. So my work knew, like it was kind of a thing. And I remember I was still, it was long enough that I was like, I'm not, it had been months, like been a couple of months. And so I was like, I'm not contagious or anything. I'm just like kind of long COVID-y kind of a thing, right? Like I was weak.
Are you in bed the whole day? Like how bad is this the second time?
Sometimes it wasn't super bad, but as June approached, it started getting worse.
Okay.
But it was like just weak. I was just so weak. I just couldn't do anything. And I remember the last time I drove before I ended up in the hospital, I was driving home from somewhere up in San Pete County where I live. And I was on the phone with my buddy in Florida, and he had been telling me, he's like, dude, you got to stop like trying to help people, stop doing stuff. Like, don't go like move furniture or like
just go lay down.
He's like, you need to go crawl into bed and stay there. This was a Friday. He's like, you need to crawl into bed and stay there until you're better. Cause I don't like to be down. I didn't miss a day of school till like my junior year of high school. Like, dude. I just don't like to not be doing. Mm-hmm. And so
dude, you're a redhead like me. You're buzzing. You're always buzzing.
Yeah. Totally. And so I'm driving, and I saw that the car in front of me, I'm on the highway, and the car in front of me all of a sudden like glitched over into the other lane and back. And I was like, dude, I just saw the Matrix. And he was like, you need to get off the road.
Oh my
like
gosh.
There's something wrong. And so this was Friday. So
were you freaked out by that, or did you?
No,
stay
dude,
calm?
I was. It seemed normal to me, and we'll get to why in a second. So I get home. I was only like a mile from home. So I get home, right? And I didn't do anything from then. Like, we had like this big family event on Sunday, and I never missed that kind of stuff. And
for context, like, you're married, and how many kids do you have?
I have 3 kids.
And how old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah,
I'm 48.
Okay, 40. Okay, just that little context. Okay,
yeah. My youngest just turned 18.
Okay,
so.
Dude, you look young for 48, by the way.
So I get home and I just slept all weekend. I skipped the big family things that were going on, and Monday, somebody from work emailed me and said, "How are you doing?" And I was like so bad. I'm not doing well at all, and went back to sleep. Like I was barely even out of bed. So Tuesday I wake up in Provo in the hospital.
Oh, okay.
Like, no memory of anything in between.
This sounds like the Matrix.
So I open my eyes and I'm in a hospital bed and I can't move. And my family's there,
like,
and they
your body won't move?
My body won't move.
Whoa.
Like I can't move, and I'm just like, and my eyes open, and everyone kind of gets all excited because I'm conscious, and I said, I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, everyone's freaking out trying to tell me. So the doctor comes rushing in, and he's like, you have type 1 diabetes, and I'm like, what? And I'm like that's weird. Like, what's that all about? Like, how do you get diabetes?
Why is that the first thing he tells you after you woke up?
So Tuesday morning,
yeah,
I was like incoherent and weird.
Okay.
And so my two boys, like 18 and 20, come in and they sit me up in bed, and I just like melted onto the floor. And so they like firemen carried me, put me in the car, took me to the emergency room. And right as the ER nurse is helping me out of the car, he smelled my breath and smelled ketones on my breath. And he's like, your dad has diabetes.
What's ketones? I don't know.
So when you go into diabetic ketoacidosis,
okay,
like when your body can't process glucose,
okay,
it starts burning protein, starts burning your muscles
Ooh.
and your fat, like the keto diet,
okay,
except not targeting fat. It just burns everything else it can
okay,
for fuel. And the byproduct ketones make your breath smell like Fruit Loops.
Interesting.
And so people in ER, like they recognize that smell and they're like, something's wrong. Like that's a glucose problem, right? Like they recognize it. So immediately they're like testing my blood and they couldn't get a reading. It was my glucose levels were so high, they couldn't get a reading. Like normal people, it's like 80 to 100 is your normal kind of reading.
Yeah.
And 500 is hospital, 800 is dead.
You were what?
1600. I was 1600.
You were twice dead?
I was twice dead. I was in the ICU for 3 days, and every time the doctor came in, they literally said to me, which is like weird bedside manner, you should be dead. We don't know why you're not dead.
Jeez.
And so I'm laying there, and here's the other weird part, right? So I didn't understand anything about diabetes, and I'm laying there in the hospital, and I'm like, what? Like, why? I thought diabetes was like a thing like adults get when they're like not healthy.
Yeah.
And like, I've been vegan for 27 years.
You're obviously very healthy.
And I've been vegan since
like
for 27 years. I'm like, why do I have diabetes? This is super weird.
Yeah.
And type 1, which I didn't even really know the difference very well at the time. And so they're like training me how to like inject insulin. And like, they're like, your body doesn't make insulin anymore. Like, welcome to type 1 diabetes.
Did they tell you like when that could have started? Like, you have no answers.
So they do an A1C test. They said it started about 3 months prior is when my body started having, like, they could tell when it started, when insulin production started to fall off.
Okay.
So I said it had been about 3 months. And I'm like, that's when I started to get sick, right? So I'm laying there, right? And being vegan, being in the health world and having lots of friends, or like everybody had like a cure. And like, so I'm getting texts, so I'm laying there. And like, I had to relearn how to walk because it ate all my tiny little balance muscles.
What?
The ketoacidosis, I couldn't walk. Like, they had goals for me to like stand up 3 times a day the first day. And the second day it was like, see if you can like take 5 steps every 3 hours. Like,
what's going on in your mind? Like,
I don't know. I'm just like, all right, well, I don't know.
Were you okay with this?
I'm a pretty optimistic, positive person. So I was just like, I don't know, I'll have to get through it, right? But I'm laying there and I'm like, I'm talking to God. I'm like, what is this? Like, why this? You know, like, why do I need this right now? And so I'll give you a little window into how normally my communication with God, right? Like, I pray, I talk to him. If you've ever seen Fiddler on the Roof, like, I'm very Tevier. I'm just like talking. I'll just talk to him while I'm doing whatever. I'm just talking to him.
Do you ever sing to him?
Huh?
Do you sing to him as well?
I don't sing. Not like Tevier. Yeah. No, I wish. I mean, maybe if I were a rich man. No.
Yeah. Okay.
But typically, my wife, had prayed a lot, and I have friends who were like, oh, we prayed and the Lord told us we need to move to Cincinnati. And I'm like, you have friends in Cincinnati? No. Do you have a job? No. The Lord just told us we need to do it, and we're going. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, I never get that kind of. That's not how. That's not. So my wife's like, I really feel like we should move to Sanpete County, down there to central Utah. And I'm praying, and I'm like, I would really like one of those experiences.
Okay, so timeline, we're moving back. Like,
so I'm backing up just so you get an idea of what's happening.
Sure.
When I get this different impression. And so, just to give you an example, normally this is the Lord's normal way of God's normal way of talking to me. Is I prayed, should I move down there? Should I move my family down there, uproot everything, be farther away from work if we have to go back after COVID? And the answer was clear. You choose. My plan works for you either way. And I was like, oh, why do you always say that?
I don't care. I've got you. Either way, yeah.
Right? Like, and kind of with this follow-up of, I want you to choose. I want you to direct your life, and I'll tell you if you're off or on, but like, this is your life. You need to not be told what to do every second, right? Like that's always how it's been for me. And so I'm laying in the hospital and I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? I'm getting texts like every hour on, oh, if you just eat this or eat cinnamon or do this thing and you can get rid of this diabetes.
What was the craziest suggestions? Do you remember? There's got to be some good ones.
I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but
don't tell me who they are. I mean,
well, but they might. I don't know if they hear this. There was some interesting things, and honestly, it was a lot of very well-intentioned people. That didn't understand the difference between type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. So they were talking about like diet and exercise, herb kind of things. And the doctors are telling me that I have an autoimmune disorder and my body is destroying my ability to make insulin. And I'm like, you can't fix that with cinnamon. Like it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm laying there and I'm like, well, what should I do? I'm asking God, like, what should I do? Cause I'll do whatever. Like I ate all raw foods for like 3 years. Like I could do whatever. Like I can be determined when I want to be. And he said, and we don't usually go to the doctor, right? Like not unless we absolutely have to break broken bones or something. And he said, like, do what the medical industry do what the doctors tell you. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, and it was pretty strong.
And that wouldn't have been natural to you, right?
That wouldn't be my natural thing to do. And it wasn't, you choose. It was do what the doctors tell you. And nobody really understood it. Like even my kids sometimes were like, Dad, don't you want to just try like some of these things? And I'm like, no, like, the Lord's told me how to roll with this. And so 4 months later, I go into my endocrinologist and they had done some new blood work. And she's like, so I have some news for you. You do not have type 1 diabetes. And I was like, what? And she's like, your pancreas is functioning perfectly. And I said, well, how come I have to inject insulin every meal? Like, why is that happening? And they're like, we don't really know. Like, this is kind of a new thing for us. In the hospital, my thyroid was completely not functioning. My pancreas was completely not functioning. And I was almost in complete kidney failure. And so now, fast forward to today, I'm not on insulin at all. I have a medication that's like resensitizing me to insulin. But basically, like our hypothesis at this point is COVID just shut all my organs down. And so then I couldn't process glucose. And so it presented like diabetes. Yeah. And so they pumped me with insulin to keep me alive. And then it just started to slowly get better with the help of different medications and different approaches. But I mean, I was on insulin for a year and a half. So it wasn't like a quick fix.
Dang.
It was a long thing to get to this. Oh, and the crazy part that I was going to tell you related to seeing the Matrix.
Yeah.
So when your glucose levels get above a certain point, you are as high as a kite, like stoned high. Like I would be sitting there and I would see my spoon move and hide behind my oatmeal when I was in the hospital. Like I was crazy. My kids didn't record any of my crazy stuff because they didn't think it was going to go away. And like, they were all terrified.
Do you wish they would have?
I so wish they would have.
Dude.
I so wish. And I feel like this is an indicator into like sometimes like people, get, go to the dentist or whatever. And they do that. And like, it kind of an indicator into their like completely uninhibited, like life and mindset. I'm sitting there in the hospital and they bring me my lunch, and it was like pasta with zucchini and stuff. And I was like, I see Mary Magdalene in my pasta. So at least I wasn't like vulgar sailor from my old days or anything weird, right? Like I was like, I see the mother of Jesus. Not the mother of Jesus, but Mary Magdalene, because it wasn't. It was Mary Magdalene. I was like,
that is so wild.
It was kind of crazy. I was crazy, but So one of the things also that happened while I was there is I had been looking for almost kind of like what you're doing, right? Like I wanted something more to serve my community and do different things. And I thought about politics and quickly decided that was just not like, it was all the contention and all, everything. And like, I didn't want to do that. And I just didn't know what to do, but I knew I needed to do something. And for like a year and a half, I'd just been telling the Lord, tell me what you want me to do. And I had met this guy that did search and rescue up in Sanpete County. And so I was laying in the hospital. I was like, when I get out and get better and can walk and open a jar of pasta sauce, which took me like a month. Like I couldn't grip. Gosh. I couldn't do anything. I would turn around too fast and just fall over. Like it was like weird because I've always been strong and healthy, and all of a sudden I wasn't. And it was super weird, but I was like, when I get better, I'm gonna call that dude, and I'm gonna join search.
Did you ever entertain that you wouldn't get better, or did you just?
No, never.
That's awesome.
No, I mean, even from the moment I opened my eyes, like temporary. It was temporary.
That says a lot about you.
Even though getting better could, in my mind, like I did come to terms with before the 4-month visit where they said you don't have type 1 diabetes. I had come to terms with the fact that I was going to be injecting insulin for the rest of my life.
What in your past years had made you, like what experiences made you positive? How did you see things so positively?
Probably, I would say more than anything, I mean, unless there's like an element of just born with certain traits or characteristics, I would say my parents. Yeah. For sure. They were just super positive. Like I was raised, my mom, my dad, my stepdad, my parents divorced when I was young. And so I'd spend summers out here in Utah and the rest of the year in California. My stepdad flew life flight, which is probably why I resonated with search and rescue later. But my mom and my dad were like super hippie, like just so cool. My mom's an artist. But they were just so like supportive and loving, and just there was never any negativity in our relationships. Dude, and I think that's got to be that's priceless. Yeah. The more I talk to people and I'm aware of the conversations and how people react to stuff, it's never been more clear that seeing things positively or negatively affects your actions and affects like how you deal with things. Right? Absolutely. It's like it's such a gift and a curse to be aware of that, and then to make the choice to be cool with it, because your situation, like someone waking up paralyzed in the hospital, type 1 diabetes, it's like they could have put themselves through a lot of suffering that you didn't go through. Some extra suffering. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's pretty fascinating. I'm glad you had cool parents. I've never been able to put myself really into the shoes of someone who doesn't have that natural positivity, but it exists, right? Like lots of people don't naturally just come to that, whether by their fault. I feel like sometimes I can be insensitive to that perspective because I just don't. You're just like, how could you look at it like that? I just don't understand it. It's not that I'm like, how could you? I'm just like, I don't know what that's like. Like I try not to assume that anyone else sees it the way I do, but I just don't know what it's like to look at a situation and be like, we're not getting out of this one. So how do you look at a trial? Do you look at it like, I'm going to grow, or it's going to be okay eventually? Like what is... No. I'm still just... I still look at trials and I'm like, I don't want this. Like, I don't want it. Well, no one wants it, but I mean, like, you're positive though. Yeah. Like how do you see it? I mean, I recognize, I think that trials are for us. Let me rephrase that. I feel like there's no getting around trials, right? Like, I mean, even that word, right? Like, it's just experiences. Yeah. Even using the word trial, that's just labeling an experience as negative. It's true, right? I just did it. Yeah. See how positive I am. I'm like, I don't even like that word. Dude, this is refreshing. Go for it. But life is full of experiences, and not all of them are pleasant. I don't know why I joined the Navy. I mean, other than I have military, my stepdad was in the Army and then life flight, and that probably influenced it some, but I didn't have any family that was in the Navy. Like, it was just this thing. Like, I graduated school a year early, but it was right after my 17th birthday in my senior year of high school, and I just, like, in a matter of like 2 days went and like took the armed services test, that's kind of like the SATs for the Army, like, and the results came back, and the recruiter's like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "Let's do it." And I just like signed
Is that
up.
even legal at 17?
My mom had to sign.
Oh, she signed you away.
Which is super funny, right? She had to sign, and she's this hippie, right? Like anti-war,
pacifist?
like graduated high school in '69, like right during all of that, right? And I asked her years later. I said, so like what was going through your mind? Because she didn't even question. She said, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Okay," and signed it. Like that was the whole conversation.
Dude, she sounds awesome.
And I was like, what was going through your mind? Because I have a sister-in-law whose daughter was considering joining the Navy, you know, just maybe 10 years ago or so. And she's kind of, my sister-in-law's kind of, you know, hippie mindset, kind of like just not into war and the whole war machine kind of mentality. And she was doing everything she could to talk her daughter out of it, and just was so opposed. Her parents were both so opposed. Yeah. And so I was like, why was my mom not, like, I'm curious. And so I asked her, and she's like, "I trusted you, that you knew your path." And I'm like, I didn't know anything. I was 17.
Your mom is awesome.
She's like, "No." She's like, everybody has to follow their path. And she's like, "I asked you if you were sure. You said yes. Like, I trust you."
What's her spirituality like?
I don't know if I could describe it. She's
Is she in tune with herself? Like, how is she how is she so in tune? Usually when you give the grace of something to others, it's because you have it yourself. So she trusted herself.
Like, she's so solid. Like, she's not religious.
Yeah.
Or anything like that, but she's just solid. Like, you can't be around her without feeling better about yourself. Nobody can be around her without just like being lifted. She's amazing. Yeah. And my dad was like that too. He was the most, he passed away in 2013, but he was the most non-judgmental person you could ever meet. Like,
well, you make more sense now.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you joined the Navy at 17.
Yeah.
You want to get into that?
So, oh yeah, that's where, like, we were talking about trials or experiences.
Oh
right?
Yeah. That's right.
So I do it, right? I didn't think it through at all. Like, I have one biological brother, and then I have one stepbrother that I'm really close to. But my biological brother, he's 17 months younger than me, and we were best friends our whole lives. We had all the same friend group, like growing up, shared clothes, like we were just tight. When I was in the Navy, I was like, I called him up and I was like, "Hey, I was stationed in San Diego." I was like, him and our best friend at the time, you know, from high school, I was like, "Hey, if you guys will move out here to San Diego, I'll rent an apartment and pay for everything. If you guys will just come live here." And so they did for a year. They had like
where in Coronado, like where in San Diego?
I got my apartment was 1 block from the ocean in Ocean Beach.
Oh, cool. My wife's from San Diego, so
yeah,
we're there all
like
the time.
Ocean Beach, like right on Niagara, right where the pier is.
So
like,
cool.
So they had like almost a year of just
like free living,
beach bliss, free living. But they made friends. So then I had a friend group because I didn't have time. I was gone to sea almost all the time, like Monday through Friday. I was just gone all the time. But so I do this thing, and I hadn't thought through, like, I'm not gonna see my brother every day, right? I'm driving. The recruiter actually drove me to the processing place up in Salt Lake from Heber, and I remember just like trying not to cry, and I'm like, why am I crying? And I'm like, then I started to realize like I just joined the military. What am I thinking? So, but then I end up in San Diego, right? And first day of boot camp is just like the movies, right? We're all asleep. It's like they got us in bed at like 1 a.m, and then like 5 a.m. this dude's beating on a trash can lid, metal trash can lid with a stick or something, just pounding it and screaming. And it's like straight out of the movies. And I just sat up and I thought, what have I done?
Yeah.
And you know, then it was from there. It was good and bad, and I think some people tend to focus on remembering throughout their life the negative experiences that they've had. I mostly just kind of like filter that out and remember the things that I enjoyed about the Navy rather than, you know, the parts that I didn't like being told what to do, because I was raised by like hippies. Like, why? How did I not think this through, that I wouldn't like being told what to do and that I would be gone all the time? But and throughout all of this, okay, so here's the piece missing from the conversation of the men who love God. I was atheist. I didn't grow up with any religion. None of my parents didn't push anything on me at all, and so
did you have a stance on God? Like he didn't exist, or you just didn't know?
No. I had at the time, like by the time I was in like my Navy years, I had a stance. Like,
okay, you knew.
I was atheist. Like I had a stance, right? And I had done some study. I hadn't read the whole Bible, but I read the Bhagavad Gita and like studied tons of religions, and then observations. And in my in my arrogant young mind, I just figured I knew. I knew, right? And I didn't really know very much. And a lot of the it's all the same really when you get into atheism, and a lot of the things that people say to reject there being anything more, right? A lot of it's hard to defend, honestly.
I'm reading this book right here. Have you read this? It's called.
Yeah, I think I have. I don't think I've read the whole thing, but
I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And but I hadn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a process for me, like of coming out of that. Well, I mean, it was, but yeah. So I didn't have. I was making all these choices. Like looking back, I can see times when God influenced my life, even though I didn't recognize it. Right. But for the most part, like I wasn't including him or even a belief in him.
Were you vocal about it? Like,
vocal?
Vocal.
Oh, yeah.
Like you're proselytizing.
Yeah, I was pretty vocal in my early years with everything, animal rights. Like I was like there was all kinds of stuff, right? Like I was pretty vocal and probably annoying.
And obviously self-aware.
Arrogantly annoying, I imagine, in my youth.
So how many years were you in the Navy?
I was in it for 4 years.
4 years. Is that like a typical contract? Like
it's different, I think, now than it was. I mean, back then you could do as little as 3. I don't think you can do 3 anymore. But.
Okay. One of my best friends is a chaplain in the Navy, and
I listened to that one
did you
because
really?
He was in the Navy. Yeah. I was like, well, I gotta listen to this one. That one was fascinating.
Yeah,
that was good.
Bryce Taylor.
Yeah, that was way cool.
I love going down to San Diego.
I related to a lot of what he was talking about. I was like, it was awesome.
That's cool. Did you know any chaplains? Are you required to like just know who they are when you're in the Navy?
Maybe knew who they were, right? Like, I mean, even in boot camp, like the only time you didn't have to be doing something miserable was like for 3 hours on Sunday. If you did some sort of worship service, they got like 3-hour break. So like everyone went somewhere, right? Like,
what'd you do?
I would just try different stuff, whatever. Like they had like a non-denominational Christian thing, or they'd have like a Jewish service, or like, but it was all on Sunday, only for 3 hours. Like you didn't get the Jewish guys didn't get Saturday. Seventh-day Adventists, they didn't get Saturday. Like they just had to do. You got 3 hours on Sunday, and that was it. And everyone took it. Nobody was like, "I'll just do push-ups."
Yeah.
Can I just run in circles in the hot sun?
Dude, wouldn't it be fascinating to know how many conversions might have come from that?
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting study. Yeah, I'm interested.
Right?
To know.
Like, I mean, and I was thinking about it. Like we would get up at the beginning of it, and we would all stand and we would sing at the beginning of this service. They would play like this video, and they would play Lee Greenwood's
Proud to Be American.
God Bless the USA.
Yeah.
And we would all sing it right together, and then we would break into all the different little religious services. And
interesting.
I don't remember a lot about like the actual services, other than like honestly, it was a refuge, almost more than any Sunday rest from your labors I've had ever since, because it was such a contrast from just grueling boot camp, miserable life, to like you get this 3 hours of just peace and like rest, and so that was cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, it was pretty fascinating that they built that into it.
Very nice. Okay, so you get out of the Navy. What's your journey?
I was a sonar technician in the Navy.
Oh,
right?
cool. Okay.
So Jonesy, if you've ever seen Hunt for Red October, that's everyone's like, so were you like Jonesy? Yeah, I was Jonesy.
Exactly.
Plus, I fixed the sonar, so my job was to keep it running, and so I got out, and I was kind of on a path to either like being an electrician or electrical engineer or something like that, and I was like, I mean, I have the aptitude for it and all that, but I was like, I want to do something else. And
you're like 21, 22?
Yeah, 21.
Okay.
moved back to Utah, to Salt Lake. My brother had moved back to Salt Lake. So I moved back here, and I met my wife, and we got married in 98. And then just kind of like just did whatever for a little while. Like I didn't want to like commit to anything. So I like baked bagels at Einstein's for a while and ran a juice place, kind of like Jamba Juice or whatever, like managed one of those for a little bit. And like, I just didn't want to know what to do. And then I started working for a sculptor down in Springville through my wife's sister's fiance or something, right? Like I just got this job working at this foundry.
And so you've never done anything like it before?
No, but I always thought we always thought I was going to be an artist. Like I was always way into art, and my mom's an artist, so like that's where everyone thought I was going to go. And then I did this other weird like Navy thing, and so I ended up working in this foundry, and that's where I met Virgil. I worked there for 6 months, and my wife wanted an adventure, so we moved to Washington State. And so I didn't see Virgil for a while, 6 months, 8 months, a year maybe. And then we moved back to Utah and went to this wedding of the sister-in-law who first brought me into this sculpture foundry world. And Virgil was there. And he was like, hey, I'm working for this other artist up in Salt Lake, and we're going to do this huge project. You should come check it out. Like, we're going to need more people. And so I did, and ended up getting hired on there. And so he and I worked together until he left for grad school back in Connecticut to get his master's in art. And so I was like five or 6 years. I ended up working for that sculptor for 12 years.
Wow. And
we developed like a whole new way of enlarging sculpture using like 3D scanners and CNC machines. So like all my technology stuff kind of folded back in as I helped them kind of figure some of that out and perfect it and turn it into a better way to do stuff. And in that time, so just about everyone who worked there, so like 6 or 7 people that worked there were believers. And then there's just me, this one like tattooed sailor.
Tattooed sailor.
Right.
Is that when you got your tattoos, is in the Navy?
Most of them, yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm just like this guy that just was like, but nobody cared, right? Like it was a great place. Like, and that's one of the cool things.
You never felt judged?
No.
Never. That's a big criticism of Christians is they're hypocrites and judgmental. I mean, that's
I think
not that there aren't, but that's an interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I felt it a few times over the years.
Yeah.
In the state that we're in, sometimes that can happen, but I don't think as much anymore in the same ways that it was, 20, 30 years ago. Like I feel like people are a lot less judgmental. Like everybody's got a family member with tattoos now.
Yeah, that's true.
My mom, grandma's had pink hair. Like it's not the same as it was, right? Like people, I feel like those types of things are,
I agree.
Not as big of a deal as they used to be. But as far as like in that place, no, never. Like, and they were so chill about it. Like there was never any like pushing, right? Like it was just like an example of like men who, and it was mostly men that worked there. Not only, but that's who I mostly worked with, right? Out in the foundry pouring bronze and hammering metal. It was guys, and it was all men who loved God, and they lived it. They didn't have to preach it. They just lived it. And that's part of my journey in kind of breaking down that atheist mindset was like, there's always this like, oh, they're ignorant, like brainwashed, like not intelligent. And I started learning and observing, and the people around me, people in my neighborhood and stuff. And I'm like, man, some of the most educated, like intelligent, like best people to have conversations with are all Christian. They're all like people who like recognize God and love Jesus. And I'm like, okay, so like I can't keep that. I can't keep that belief because it's not true, right? And so, so it was a great place to learn some of what it looked like for people to really live a godly life outside of just like an atheist looking from the outside and being judgmental. And
dude, you're like hitting hammers with them. That's what men need, is the shoulder to shoulder. Like you guys are working together, and that's when like good conversation, and that's when that moving forward together that is so important for men. Like I've learned that women connect looking into each other's eyes and talking over a meal, but men like to get out and do stuff shoulder to shoulder where they're progressing, and that's where like relationships with men are bonded. Yeah, and I mean that's where Virgil and I just became like brothers. He's the best. Yeah.
And so I've said his name a lot because I can't help it. Like he's a huge part of my life.
He baptized you, right?
And my story. Yeah, he did.
That's so cool. How did your conversations change? I mean, your heart was softened. So your beliefs are like starting to change a little bit, and then what?
No, that's not how it happened.
Well, that's why you're here, because I'm wrong. I want you to say.
Okay, so I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? So, I was going to church with my wife. She was a member of the same church.
Was she always in the church?
She grew up in the church. Yeah.
So when you were married, was she going to church?
She was.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was going to church, and we got married, and she was like, "Hey, will you come to church with me?" And I was like, "Sure." And I knew that she was a member. And I have members like extended family, like Pioneer, Heritage, and all that, right? Like so I was familiar with the church,
like the culture.
With the culture, I was familiar with it, and so I started going to church, and I would just go to the 2 hours, and then when she would go off with the ladies, I would go home or wait outside, or when we were in Washington, I would just like walk around in the woods until she was done, and then I worked, then eventually I was working with all these guys, but we didn't really have a lot of conversations, and then Virgil was gone. He was back in Connecticut going to school, so I'm fast forwarding from the time I met my wife to 2005 when I got baptized. I'd had missionaries come every once in a while, and eventually I got these guys, the other, other than family, my wife and others, like the other key player in this overall was this big Texan named Garen Tidwell, like just missionary.
Missionary.
Yeah.
Dude.
And the missionaries just always gave up on me because I wouldn't pray, or I like didn't take it serious in their minds, right? Or they just would struggle, like we can't figure out how to convince them that God exists, and so we can't move forward, right?
Yeah,
so
gotta start there.
So they would just get frustrated, and they would just be like, all right, we'll try him again later, put him on the list to check in 6 months or something. I don't know how they do their list, how they do that, but take a break from this. We don't know what to do. And so this, I found this out later, not at the time, but I found this out later. So this missionary comes, and he gets assigned to where I live, and he's meeting with people at church, and they're like, oh, if you could get Zach, you could get anybody. And he's like, challenge accepted. I'm from Texas. And so he would not give up no matter what, like even sometimes he knew I felt the Spirit and I would deny it. Like it was so crazy.
Did you know you were feeling it?
So there was this one time where my kids are all tiny, right? So my oldest was just 3. He was 3. And this was just maybe a month before I ended up getting baptized, a month and a half or something. And they had been they were so committed that they convinced their mission leader to let them move into the apartment next door so that he could see me every day. And he would always say, okay, I've been thinking about and studying, like I'm gonna convince you that God exists. And then he would have some new idea, right? So this one day he testified of something about Jesus, right? He was just like, and he was always trying to be like careful because he didn't want to you don't want to scare off this atheist guy, right? And I was pretty open, and I'd challenge him and stuff. And so he was but this one day he just like testified, right? And my son was sitting on my lap, his head was against my chest, and I felt it. And I felt it, like my bosom warmed. There was a burning. And he knew it. He knew it. And he pointed at me right in my eyes, and he said, wow. You felt that? And I said, no, I didn't.
What?
I was like, that's just my sweaty kid leaning against my chest. Like totally blew it off.
He knew you were lying.
He knew I felt it, but I didn't know what it felt like. And so I just blew it off. I'm like, no, you can't say this sweaty kid on my chest is the Spirit talking to me. No way. I'm like, you're not convincing me that easy. Like, I was so hard. And so they come to me like a couple weeks later, and he was like, all right, he's like, we don't know what else to do. He's like counseling with me, like how to convince me, which was really funny. He's like, we don't know what else to do. So I talked to our mission leader, and he said that if you'll agree to get baptized, then God will talk to you and tell you it's all real before your baptism day.
This is so risky.
I know.
Oh my God.
He's like, what do you think? And I was like, all right, why not? I mean,
you were just like, okay.
I was like, sure. Like, and he's like, and so he's like, why? And he's like, what if it doesn't work? Will you keep coming? Will you keep trying? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, why? And I was like, well, it means a lot to my wife. Like, honestly, it means a lot to my wife that I keep trying, because she's been married now 7 years, and she had a hard time. Like, you know, she always wanted to grow up and get married in the temple and all the things that they teach in our church. And I was not allowing that to be possible. Right. So in her mind, she didn't know if that would ever happen. And so I said, okay. And I said, all right, but here's the one condition. I said, we got to set it for 3 weeks out, because Virgil's going to be in town, and I want him to baptize me. Like, if this happened. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to, like, it was happening on a Saturday, Thursday night, still nothing. And I'd been talking by this time. Now I was having like real conversations at work, and like, because they all knew, and they were all telling me all the things to try. Like, oh, don't listen to music, watch these, you know, like everything. They were like, you got to clean your life, like do all these things, and nothing was doing anything, and it wasn't.
Did you want it at this point?
No.
Or did you? Yeah. Okay.
No.
That seems to be.
I didn't really want it. Like, I was just like,
that's
you're gonna.
Key.
I was so skeptical. I was like, you're gonna have to prove it to me. I'm not gonna go take it. You gotta give it to me. Like this, like everyone says this is a thing, like that the Lord will talk to people and he'll manifest the truth to people. I'm like, fine, do it. Like, show me. Like, prove it.
But
right?
you weren't willing
so
to
hard,
like put your foot out in the dark.
Oh, I was
Yeah,
like I was so
so frustrating.
I know. I just can't even imagine how
Dude,
hard
bless
it
this
was.
missionary. I love this guy.
He's amazing. We're still good friends to this day. He's amazing. So I'm just laying there contemplating all that I've studied. So I've been going to church for 7 years by this time.
Yeah.
Right? Like half of the people that I went to church with every week didn't know I wasn't a member. Like, because I was like, I mean, they were like, had me involved in scouting and all kinds of things. Like, I was super involved at this point, but it was just because like that was my community. Like, kind of by force, that was my community. And they were great people. And again, like I was like meeting all these people and getting to know them and serving alongside them in scouting and different things. And I'm like, these are the best people I've ever known. Like, so my walls are breaking down, but I don't know it, right? Like, I didn't know that the Lord was breaking me down. He was just doing it subtly so that I wouldn't scare off,
Doesn't
right?
want to spook you.
God wouldn't spook me, right? So he's like, but he knows. He knows us, right? And he knows how and when, and there's no timeline. You know, it doesn't have to be, oh, you met somebody that introduced you until you have 6 weeks. And you got to, you know, like his timeline isn't the same as ours. And he's like, I know what he needs and I'll make it happen. And so I'm laying there and I'm pondering on everything.
This is Thursday night again.
This is Thursday night. Yeah. And I'm laying there and I'm just like, all right, well, I'm thinking about like, you know, the beginnings of the church and the stories about Jesus and all this stuff. And I'm laying there and I'm kind of like pondering like, all right, well, you know, maybe everyone's just lying and it's all made up and Joseph Smith he was just this charlatan and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, I'm like, that's one possibility, right? Like, okay, maybe that's true. And I'm like, but if that were true, then all the people that I know are at best, like just tricked, you know, at worst, like culpable, like intentionally trying to trick other people. And I'm like, that doesn't jive. You know, I know too many amazing people. Like, there's no way. Like, they're sincere. I'm like, okay, so maybe there's like everyone's sincere but fooled. I'm like, man, that's really hard. Like, typically cults and things like that, where it's like there's a really charismatic leadership. It does not last 100 and, you know, almost 200 years now, but like 100. It doesn't last. Like, they burn out. Like, eventually, when that leader disappears, it's really hard to maintain that year after year. And typically you can kind of see some signs. And I'm like, this time Gordon B. Hinckley, I think, was the president of the church, and I'm like, I'd watched him, give talks and different things, and I was like, no, that guy was like, if he was my grandpa, I'd be pretty honored. Like that guy was just, you could tell he had a gentle spirit, right? Like he was legit, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think anyone's trying to trick anybody. Like, maybe they're delusional, and like, kind of Branch Davidian, David Koresh kind of thing. Like maybe they think these things when they're not true. And I'm like, that also doesn't jive. Like it not only didn't feel right, but just from like a logical perspective, like you observe it and you're like, no way does this trickle down into the people that I actually know. Yeah. And the organization that I've been kind of dragged into, right, against my what I thought were my own choice and desires. And so I was like, and that's kind of the point where I was just laying there and I was like, I guess maybe it could be true. Like, but it was like this really tentative.
It was your
little,
first
like,
time where you opened, like,
cracked the door. Like the first time I cracked the door, and I was like, maybe it's true. And then I was like, well, where did that come from? Like, because I'd never really like honestly given place for even the possibility. Like I just rejected even the thought of it, and I was like, maybe it is true. I'm like, oh, what if it's true? Like, could that be one of the options? I'd never even made that an option. And I was like, maybe it is true. What if it's true? And as soon as I was like, that makes more sense than the other options I had, considered. And I was like, I don't know. Like it's been 19 years now. So, I mean, my best recollection was like, I don't know if I was 100% like sincere, but I must have had enough for the Lord to gift me the rest. And I said to my son, who was asleep and had no part in this conversation, like, but I was just helping him go to sleep, right? He's 3. And I was like, Eli, I think I'm getting baptized on Saturday. And I said that out loud. And then there was this rush of the Spirit that everyone had been talking about, that I've been hearing for 7 years, plus my whole life from my grandma. And it was like overwhelming. It was overwhelming. And I was like, like I almost gasped, and I was like, that's what that feels like. And I was like, and then I said it for real, and I was like, I'm getting baptized on Saturday. So I go in to the room to put my son to bed, an atheist. Okay. Oh no. So here's the part so if what everyone was telling me was true, all at once, I believed in God. I believed in Jesus. Wow. I believed in prophets. I believed in the Book of Mormon. I believed in the Bible. I believed in the history of Christianity, like all of it at once. And I'd been studying for 7 years, so it was a lot of factual knowledge turned into like belief. All of it at once. So I walked. You
already had the evidence.
Yeah.
You just finally were willing, and it just like.
So all the evidence at once became truth. And so I went in that night. I went into my son's bedroom, an atheist, and like a half an hour later, I walked out a full believer, which was crazy. And my wife she couldn't even believe it.
Was she crying? What was she doing?
She was like, this can't be real. So like we the next day we like set up, she organized the baptism. Cause I didn't tell anybody like at church or anything. I didn't tell anybody this was happening. Cause I was like, I am not going to do this for the wrong reason and get pressured. And so in one day she was like, and I was working like 12-hour days cause we had this huge deadline with this sculpture. So Virgil knew that it was going to be a possibility, but he was like, I think he was probably like, man, I don't know. It's like Thursday, still nothing. So I call him, right? So I call him Friday and I'm like, hey, it's on. And he was like, what? What? My wife's like, what? Everyone's like, what? And so then it was like this whirlwind all day Friday where my wife's just getting it ready. And then Saturday we go and I get baptized, and it was like standing room only and just crazy. And then Sunday I go to church and they call me up to the pulpit and they're like, this crazy thing happened yesterday. And everyone's like, what? No, like they call me up and they're like, why don't you tell them what happened? and so like, he got baptized yesterday, and there's like this audible gasp. And then later I find out like half of the congregation thought I was already a believer, right? So like, they're like, what? This is what... and so then that was the beginning of that was the beginning of my journey as a believer, and yeah, wild.
Dude, there's so much, like, hearing your story for the first time, I went through the emotion of, like, it's just so interesting how much joy a fellow Christian has for someone who comes to the fold.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
so real and palpable.
Absolutely.
And you coming into the fold doesn't give me, like, monetarily anything. You're not,
No,
you know what
yeah.
I'm saying? It's just like this joy that I don't know why it's so, well, I do know why it's so, I can suspect why it's so powerful, but I just want to say that's a real thing. Like,
No, thank you.
yeah.
And I know exactly how I feel. And I truly think it crosses denominational
Totally
borders.
agree. It's Jesus Christ.
I was in California for work last year, and I happened to be there when my best friend from when I was younger in California just happened to be there the same weekend that he had decided to get baptized into his church.
Oh yeah.
And so I got to go. And I mean, it was like, it was like the full like rock band, like lines of people. And it was wild and in some ways very different from the solemnity that I experienced at my baptism. But I mean, the spirit was strong and we were crying and it was amazing. And I had that same feeling that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like
Jesus.
That
Jesus
feeling of my brother like publicly like acknowledging Jesus Christ and saying I want to be a part of this was super meaningful.
I love it. That it's such a motivator. It just drives me, the thought of people finding Christ and finding that like peace that you can't give words to.
Yeah.
That is
you're
amazing.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you can't give words to it.
I can't. Our words suck. we try to describe these emotions. Like I'm feeling the spirit right now. I can't describe it, but it's like I just know it's real.
Yeah.
Okay, this is incredible. So Virgil, does he freak out when he's like, was he still skeptical or like how did that?
I don't think he was ever skeptical. Like when I talk to him about it, like even now, he's like, I always knew. He's like, I always knew. He's like, you're the only one that didn't know.
Yeah, everyone knew. They're just waiting.
Because he's him, and he's just like, oh man.
Okay, so let's go back to something because this book that I'm reading is so fascinating. It says it's basically like no amount of evidence can convince someone. Either way.
Nope. Yeah, it's true.
The key is willingness. It's like there's a gap between evidence and the knowledge, right? There's a gap, and
on both sides.
On both sides. Like with Christianity, there's a gap where faith is required, and there's a gap of an atheist to like know something. You have to have a lot of faith to come to your conclusion, and that and it's the willingness, it's the open heart, and that's what you held off for so long. It was the perfect timing. I'm not saying it was the wrong timing,
but so long. It was so long.
And as soon as you cracked it, it's like I'm willing to like entertain this. God's just like, boom.
Yep.
Like you already know.
He was like, like
it just comes crashing.
The power of the Spirit is like all he needed was a crack because one drop is more than we can even hold. So that's why it feels. That's why I think that's why the Spirit, when you feel it, it's like overwhelming. Is because we can't hold even a bit of it. Like,
and you want it, and you immediately want to share. You want to like call someone, or you want to like go do something. You want to.
And that's so true. Yeah. I've never heard it described like that. What did you just say? Like you want to go do something.
Yeah, it's like I don't want. I can't sit here. It's like I got to go find my wife or my kid, and like I got to call my dad.
Do something or like just run around in the yard. Something.
Yeah.
It's like
where the opposite is like sin and misery. It's like you cave in on yourself, and you want to be. You don't want to talk to anyone.
Absolutely.
And it's just such the opposite. And that to me, that evidence right there tells me that God is real. I mean, that
Amen, brother.
I mean, that is enough for me right there. Those two, that dichotomy of sin, despair, hopelessness, isolation, as opposed to openness, love, beyond words that you can describe the peace, the hope, the joy, the fun. Yeah.
My daughter loves the old Anne of Green Gables
movies.
I
love those. Oh, we love those.
We used to watch those every once in a while, even before we had kids.
Did you look like a character from Anne of Green Gables
nice.
with your bow tie and your...
So there's this one scene, right, where Anne dyes her hair all green, right? And she's just miserable. And she says to Marilla, she's like, I am in the depths of despair. Haven't you ever been in the depths of despair? And this phrase stood out to me even before I was a believer. Marilla says back to her, she says, no, child, something like that. She says, to despair is to turn your back on God. And I was like, ooh, that's powerful. And like ever since then, I've, known who God is. I mean, I've had moments, right? Like I've had moments, but they're very fleeting. Partly because that phrase comes into my head when I try to go into despair, and it's like, what's the last thing I want to do is turn my back on God? Because He's never turned His back on me. It's always me turning my back on Him, not the other way around. And so it's just like, no, I can't go there. Like I gotta figure a way to stay out of the depths of despair. Like,
well, that's a great wrap to your story. I want to give you the final word. And first of all, thank you for sharing all these cool stories. And,
you're welcome.
And you definitely brought the spirit, and I'm so glad you're here and to know you. What would you, as a final words of wisdom to your fellow brothers out there who may be in the depths of despair? What do you want to tell them?
I think that's a great question, and I think a great way to wrap this up, because I think there is a lot of despair, and there's a lot of struggle. And I remember you talking when we first met. You talked about men spending time with men, and the reaction in the room when you said men should spend time with their mates, like a couple of days a week with their homies.
Twice a week is a study,
right? And I think I might have been the only person in the room who was like, yeah, I do that. I think if you're feeling despair, and I've got a friend who's really struggling right now, and his situation's pretty bad, and nobody would fault him for being in that place of despair. But I would say you gotta, I mean, and it's kind of cliche, right? But it's like, you gotta get outside yourself, and either, and it doesn't have to always be like serving other people, but it can be, right? That's helpful. But even if it's just go be with, you need people, and men need men. We need that camaraderie, that brotherhood. We need it, and without it, there's a void. There's a hole.
I just want to say it's like, it is a need. It's not a nice thing that will help your life.
No, it's a need.
It's like an essential thing.
It's a need. Yeah. And most men who I have known who find themselves in a really hard place, that's lacking or is a low priority, and there's a lot of reasons why, right? Sure. That kind of happens. Family life sometimes just like overtakes it, and you don't notice. But and be patient, with yourself. Like there were a lot of times over the course of leading up to, and even honestly after I found God, that I regretted not doing it sooner because of this or that. Like I felt bad. Like why did I have to be so like hard-hearted for so long? And then like things could have been better, with this, or like I could have, like all this second guessing of the Lord's timing and how your journey, like we all think we have to like define how a journey is supposed to look. Yeah. And a relationship with God is supposed to look some way. I mean, like I said, like mostly the Lord is constantly telling me just like, go figure it out. And, if you're hitting the outside edges, I'll guide you back in, or if there's something serious. But for the most part, like my journey is going to look different than someone else who like is tapped into the Spirit in a way where they feel guided every day. And there's no right or wrong to that. Like if that's the way that, if that's what they need, and if that's what their journey is, like don't feel like your journey has to look like someone else's. And man, I don't know, don't turn your back on God. Reach out to Him even when you're in despair, and just find, I don't know, I'm thinking specifically about my one really, really dear friend that's struggling with this right now. And you got to find people. You got to find people that you need someone, you need brothers to strengthen you. And the whole iron sharpens iron, man. It's true.
That is a true.
So true.
Oh, good words, dude. This has been awesome. I'm so glad to be your friend and to know you. And I'm grateful you drove far to come see me today.
Oh, thank you.
So thanks, Zach. Appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great.
If you like this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you're looking for more ways to include God throughout your day, check out some of my recent music I created in partnership with Skylight. Link in the description.